To everyone at Sunshine Valley Farm, Danny was just another farmhand. But Daniel Anderson was actually a billionaire seeking something money couldn't buy: true love. When city girl Natalie Price arrives, their worlds collide. But can love survive? When the truth comes out. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Daniel Anderson stood on the porch of his modest farmhand cabin, a steaming mug of coffee warming his calloused hands. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the endless acres of his property. Not that anyone around here knew it was his. To everyone at Sunshine Valley Farm, he was just Danny, the new hired hand who kept to himself. At 35, Daniel had everything a man could want: a massive agricultural empire spanning 3 states, more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes, and a face that had graced the covers of farming industry magazines as America's most eligible bachelor farmer. Everything except what he truly wanted: someone who loved him for who he was, not what he owned. "Morning, boss," called Martin, the farm manager who was one of only 2 people who knew Daniel's true identity. "Ready for another day of pretending to be poor?" Daniel sighed. "Don't start, Martin. This is the only way I can find someone genuine." "If you say so," Martin replied, shaking his head. "But 2 months of this charade and all you've got are blisters and a sunburn." "It'll be worth it," Daniel insisted. His last relationship had ended when he discovered his fiancée had been investigating his net worth before they'd even gone on their 3rd date. The pain of that betrayal still stung. "Well, better get moving," Martin said, checking his watch. "The new batch of seasonal workers arrives in an hour. I'll need you to show them around, just like any other farmhand would." Daniel nodded, finishing his coffee. He'd specifically instructed his HR department to hire more single women this season. Not that he'd admit that to Martin. Natalie Price clutched her worn backpack to her chest as the bus rumbled down the dusty country road. At 28, this was not where she had imagined her life would be. Just 6 months ago, she'd been a rising marketing executive in Chicago with a corner office and a promising future. Now she was headed to work on some farm in the middle of nowhere, all because of one terrible mistake. "Last stop, Sunshine Valley," the bus driver called out. Natalie squared her shoulders as she stepped off the bus. The small group of fellow workers looked equally out of place, mostly city folks down on their luck. A heavy-set woman with kind eyes approached her. "First-time farm work, honey?" she asked. Natalie nodded. "That obvious, huh?" "The designer sunglasses were my first clue," the woman chuckled. "I'm Irene. 3rd season here. The work's hard, but it pays decent and the boss stays out of your way. I'm Natalie, and I'm not here by choice," she admitted. "I owe someone a lot of money, and this was the only way to start paying it back." Irene raised an eyebrow, but didn't pry further. "Well, whatever brought you here, just remember to pace yourself. City folks always try to prove themselves on day 1 and end up unable to move on day 2. A battered pickup truck approached, kicking up dust as it came to a stop in front of the group. A ruggedly handsome man with sun-kissed skin and work-worn hands stepped out. Natalie felt an unexpected flutter in her stomach. "Welcome to Sunshine Valley," he said, his voice deep and warm. "I'm Danny. I'll be showing you around today." Natalie couldn't help but stare. This wasn't what she'd expected a farmhand to look like. Despite the faded jeans and simple t-shirt, there was something about the way he carried himself that suggested depth. "You got a problem?" Danny asked, catching her stare. "Just surprised," Natalie replied, unable to stop herself. "Though you don't look like a farmhand." A few workers chuckled nervously. "And what does a farmhand look like exactly?" Danny asked, a challenge in his eyes. "I don't know. Less put together, I guess," Natalie said, immediately regretting her words. Danny's expression hardened. "Well, Ms. Price. Natalie Price. Ms. Price. Out here, we don't judge people by how they look. We judge them by how hard they work. Now, if everyone will follow me, I'll show you to your quarters." As the group followed Danny, Irene whispered to Natalie, "Nice going. That's the first time I've ever seen Danny show any emotion. Usually he's like a robot." Natalie felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Great start, she thought. Not even 5 minutes, and I've already made an enemy. Daniel couldn't stop thinking about the woman with the sharp tongue and designer sunglasses. Natalie Price. Something about her had gotten under his skin immediately. Perhaps it was the way she'd looked at him, not with the deference the other workers showed, but with a challenge in her eyes. As he showed the group around the farm, he kept finding his gaze drifting back to her. Despite her obvious discomfort with the rural setting, she paid close attention to his instructions, asking surprisingly insightful questions about the work. "These are the worker cabins," he explained, pointing to a row of small but well-maintained structures. 2 people per cabin. You'll find your assignments posted on the community board. He consulted his clipboard. "Anderson and Mills, cabin 3. Johnson and Taylor, cabin 4. Price and..." He paused, noticing a problem. "It seems we're short 1 female worker. Ms. Price, you'll be in cabin 7 alone for now." "Lucky," someone muttered. "The dining hall serves breakfast at 5 a.m., lunch at noon, and dinner at 6 p.m., Daniel continued. "Work begins at sunrise and ends at sunset, with appropriate breaks. Any questions?" Natalie raised her hand. "What exactly will I be doing? My arrangement didn't specify." Daniel consulted his clipboard again, curious about this arrangement she mentioned. The note from HR simply said, "Special placement. See Martin for details." "You'll start with the others harvesting the East Fields tomorrow," he said. "After that, you'll receive your permanent assignment." As the group dispersed to settle into their cabins, Daniel headed straight to Martin's office. "What's the story with Natalie Price?" he asked without preamble. Martin looked up from his paperwork, a knowing smile spreading across his face. "Finally found someone interesting, have we?" "Just answer the question," Daniel said, refusing to take the bait. "Let's see," Martin said, pulling up a file on his computer. "Ah yes, Ms. Price, former marketing executive, got involved with an investment scheme that went south. Owes a significant amount to Anderson Agricultural Industries, which is you in case you've forgotten. Legal worked out a repayment plan that includes 6 months of labor here." Daniel frowned. "She owes money to me? And nobody thought to mention this?" "You said you wanted to be treated like any other farmhand," Martin reminded him. "That includes not being bothered with every detail of company business. Besides, she has no idea she's working for the man she's indebted to. She thinks she's just working to pay back some faceless corporation." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "This complicated things. Make sure she gets assigned to the herb garden after the harvest is done. We need someone with a delicate touch there." Martin raised an eyebrow. "A delicate touch? Yesterday you said you needed someone who wouldn't be afraid to get dirty." "Just do it," Daniel said, turning to leave. "Whatever you say, boss," Martin called after him. "But remember, you wanted authentic. Getting involved with someone who's essentially your indentured servant isn't exactly starting on equal footing." Daniel paused at the door. "I'm not getting involved with anyone. I'm just making sure the right people are in the right positions." Even as he said it, he knew he was lying to himself. Natalie collapsed onto the small bed in her cabin, every muscle screaming in protest. She'd never worked so hard in her life. The orientation day had been brutal enough, with a tour of the sprawling farm under the hot sun, but the real work had started the next day, and it had been merciless. "This is your punishment," she reminded herself. "This is what happens when you trust the wrong person." A knock at her door interrupted her pity party. She groaned as she forced herself to her feet. It was Danny holding a small jar. "Arnica cream," he said, offering it to her. "For the muscles. First day's always the worst." Natalie stared at him suspiciously. "Why are you being nice to me? I was rude to you yesterday." Danny shrugged. "Everyone deserves a second chance. Besides, I noticed you kept going even when the others took breaks. That takes grit." She accepted the jar, their fingers brushing briefly. A small jolt of electricity passed between them, causing Natalie to pull back quickly. "Thanks," she said, suddenly flustered. "I'm sorry about what I said. I've been going through a rough time, but that's no excuse for being judgmental." "Apology accepted," Danny said with a small smile. "Get some rest. Tomorrow won't be any easier, but it gets better after the 3rd day, I promise." As he turned to leave, Natalie found herself not wanting him to go. "How long have you worked here?" she asked quickly. Danny seemed surprised by the question. "At Sunshine Valley. About 2 months, but I've been working farms my whole life." "Do you like it? This life?" A genuine smile spread across Danny's face, transforming him from merely handsome to breathtaking. There's nothing better than watching things grow, knowing your hands helped make it happen. The world makes sense out here in a way it never does in the city. I'll have to take your word for it, Natalie said. I'm a city girl through and through. We'll see, Danny replied with a knowing look that both irritated and intrigued her. Sunshine Valley has a way of changing people. Good night, Miss Price. Natalie, she corrected him. If I'm going to be here for 6 months, we might as well be on a first-name basis. Good night, Natalie, Danny said, his voice softening around her name in a way that made her heart skip a beat. After he left, Natalie applied the cream to her aching muscles, trying to ignore the warmth that spread through her at the thought of Danny's smile. She was here to pay off her debt and return to her real life, not develop feelings for some farmhand, no matter how attractive he might be. But as she drifted off to sleep, it was Danny's kind eyes and gentle hands that filled her dreams, not the glittering city lights she'd left behind. For your start, over the next few weeks, Daniel found himself creating excuses to check on the east fields where Natalie was working. He told himself it was just to make sure the new workers were adapting well, but he knew the truth. Something about Natalie Price captivated him. Unlike the other city workers who complained constantly, Natalie attacked each task with determination. Her hands, once manicured and soft, were becoming calloused and strong. Yet she maintained a dignity that impressed him. She never begged for easier assignments or tried to charm her way out of difficult work. You're spending an awful lot of time with the newbies, Martin commented one evening as they reviewed the day's productivity reports in the privacy of Daniel's real home, a stunning modern farmhouse hidden in a secluded part of the property. Just making sure everyone's settling in, Daniel replied, not meeting Martin's knowing gaze. Especially Ms. Price, from what I hear. Daniel looked up sharply. What are you implying? Nothing, Martin said, raising his hands in surrender. Just observing that you've never taken such an interest in a seasonal worker before. And I'm not the only one who's noticed. Who else is talking? Daniel demanded, suddenly concerned. Relax. The workers just think Danny the farmhand has a crush. Nobody suspects the great Daniel Anderson is slumming it to find true love. Daniel winced at Martin's blunt assessment. It's not like that. No, then what is it like? Daniel struggled to find the right words. She's different, genuine. When she looks at me, she sees just a man, not a balance sheet. Because she doesn't know about the balance sheet, Martin pointed out. Look, I've known you since college. I want you to be happy. But this deception has gone on long enough. If you really like this woman, you need to come clean before it goes any further. Not yet, Daniel insisted. Just a little longer, once I'm sure. Martin sighed heavily. She's going to find out eventually, and the longer you wait, the worse it'll be. Deep down, Daniel knew Martin was right, but the thought of seeing disappointment and anger replace the growing warmth in Natalie's eyes was more than he could bear. Just a few more weeks, he told himself, just until he was certain what he was feeling was real, and that she might feel the same. Natalie wiped the sweat from her brow as she carefully planted another seedling in the herb garden. After 3 weeks of harvesting, she'd been reassigned here, much to her surprise. It was easier on her body but required a level of care and attention that challenged her in different ways. You've got a knack for this, a now familiar voice said behind her. Natalie looked up to see Danny leaning against the greenhouse door, a smile playing on his lips. Over the past weeks, he'd become a constant presence in her new life, offering advice, occasionally sharing lunch breaks, and slowly drawing her out of her shell. I killed every houseplant I ever owned in Chicago, she admitted with a laugh. But these little guys are different somehow, more resilient. Maybe you're the one who's become more resilient, Danny suggested, kneeling beside her to inspect her work. Perfect spacing, you're a natural. His praise warmed her more than it should have. I had a good teacher, she replied, then quickly changed the subject. So, what brings the mysterious Danny to my humble herb garden today? He raised an eyebrow. Mysterious, me? Don't play dumb, Natalie said, carefully patting soil around another seedling. Everyone talks about how no one knows anything about you. Where you came from, why you're here. You're like the farm's very own enigma. Danny shrugged. Not much to tell. Just a guy who loves farming. No family? No tragic backstory? No secret identity? She teased. Something flickered in his eyes that Natalie couldn't quite read. Would it make me more interesting if I had all those things? You're already interesting enough, she admitted before she could stop herself. A slow smile spread across Danny's face. High praise from a city girl who thought all farmhands were supposed to have missing teeth and overalls. Natalie groaned. You're never going to let me live that down, are you? Probably not, he agreed cheerfully. Listen, I actually came to invite you to the bonfire tonight. It's a monthly tradition. Good food, some music, a chance to relax a little. I don't know, Natalie hesitated. She'd been keeping to herself, focused on her work and counting down the days until she could return to her real life. Come on, Danny urged. All work and no play makes Natalie a dull girl. Fine, she relented, but I'm not promising to have fun. Wouldn't dream of asking for such a commitment, he teased, getting to his feet. I'll come by your cabin around 7. As he walked away, Natalie felt a flutter of anticipation that had nothing to do with the prospect of the bonfire and everything to do with spending an evening with Danny. She was starting to care for him, and that terrified her. In less than 5 months, she'd be gone, back to Chicago and the life she'd temporarily lost. Getting attached to anyone, especially a farmhand with no ambition beyond the next harvest, was a complication she didn't need. But as she watched his retreating figure, she admitted to herself that some complications might be worth the risk. The bonfire blazed against the night sky, casting a warm glow over the gathering of workers. Music played from portable speakers, and tables laden with homemade food lined one side of the clearing. Natalie sat on a log beside Danny, a plate of food balanced on her knees, feeling more relaxed than she had in months. Admit it, Danny said, nudging her shoulder with his. You're having fun. It's not terrible, Natalie conceded with a small smile. The past 3 hours had flown by as Danny introduced her to people, encouraged her to try Irene's famous apple pie, and even convinced her to join in one of the country dances. High praise indeed, he laughed. Come on, I want to show you something. He stood and offered his hand. Natalie took it without hesitation, allowing him to lead her away from the bonfire and down a small path. They walked in comfortable silence, their hands still linked, until they reached a small hill overlooking the entire farm. This is my favorite spot on the whole property, Danny said softly as they sat on the grassy slope. You can see everything from here. Natalie gazed out at the view. The farm stretched before them, silver in the moonlight. In the distance, the lights of the main house twinkled like earthbound stars. It's beautiful, she admitted. Peaceful. Not what you expected farm life to be? Not at all, Natalie said honestly. I thought I'd hate every minute of being here, but it's growing on me, Danny studied, her face in the moonlight. And what about the people? Are they growing on you too? The question hung between them, weighted with meaning. Natalie's heart raced as she met his gaze. Some more than others, she admitted quietly. Danny reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. His touch sent shivers down her spine. Natalie, Danny, there you are, a voice called from behind them, breaking the moment. They turned to see Martin approaching rapidly. Sorry to interrupt, but there's an issue with the irrigation system in the North Fields. They need you right away. Danny's expression clouded with frustration. Now? Afraid so, Martin said, looking genuinely apologetic as his eyes darted between them. It's urgent, Danny sighed heavily. I'm sorry, Natalie, I need to handle this. Of course, she said, trying to hide her disappointment. Duty calls. I'll walk you back to your cabin first, he offered. No need, Martin interjected quickly. I can do that while you go check on the irrigation. Mr. Anderson is waiting for your assessment. Something unspoken passed between the two men, and Danny reluctantly nodded. I'll see you tomorrow, he asked Natalie, his eyes conveying what his words couldn't. I'll be in the herb garden, she confirmed with a small smile. As Danny jogged away, Natalie turned to Martin. Who's Mr. Anderson? I don't think I've met him. Martin seemed momentarily flustered. The owner. He, doesn't come around much. Very private man. Must be nice, Natalie said, gazing at the distant main house. Owning all this beauty and never showing up to appreciate it. "Oh, he appreciates it," Martin assured her as they began walking back toward the cabins. "More than you might think." He studied her carefully. "You and Danny seem to be getting close." Natalie felt her cheeks warm. "We're friends. He's been kind to me." "Danny's a good man," Martin said carefully. "But everyone has secrets, Miss Price, even the simplest souls." "What's that supposed to mean?" Natalie asked, suddenly uneasy. "Just friendly advice," Martin replied. "Be careful with your heart. Things on this farm aren't always what they seem." Before she could press him further, they arrived at her cabin. Martin bid her good night and disappeared into the darkness, leaving Natalie with an unsettled feeling that marred the otherwise perfect evening. As she prepared for bed, Martin's cryptic warning echoed in her mind. What secrets could Danny possibly have? And why did she suddenly feel like she was missing something important? Little did she know, the truth was far more complicated than she could ever imagine, and it was about to change everything. The morning after the bonfire, Daniel paced the polished hardwood floors of his hidden farmhouse. He hadn't slept well, Martin's words echoing in his mind. "The longer you wait, the worse it'll be." "You look terrible," Martin observed as he entered with the daily reports. "Guilt keeping you up?" "I almost kissed her last night," Daniel admitted. "If you hadn't shown up when you did, you'd have crossed a line you can't uncross," Martin finished for him. "You should be thanking me." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. I know, it's just, I haven't felt this way about anyone before." "Then tell her the truth," Martin said simply. "The real Daniel Anderson isn't a bad guy. Maybe she'd like him too. Or maybe she'll hate me for lying to her." Martin set down the reports with a sigh. "Look, I get it. But every day you continue. This charade, you're digging yourself a deeper hole. And it's not just about Natalie anymore. The board is asking questions about why you've gone off-grid. Peterson called twice yesterday." Daniel grimaced. Jeffrey Peterson, his company's CFO, was notoriously impatient. "What did you tell him?" "That you're conducting a hands-on evaluation of farm operations, but he's not buying it. He wants a video call next week to discuss the quarterly projections." "Fine," Daniel conceded. "Set it up. But here, not at the corporate office." "And Natalie?" Daniel walked to the window, looking out at his vast property. Somewhere out there, Natalie was probably already at work in the herb garden. The thought made him smile despite his worries. "I'll tell her," he promised, "but I need to find the right moment." Natalie hummed softly as she tended to the herbs, a habit she'd picked up over the past weeks. The sun was warm on her back, and the earthy scent of the garden filled her with an unexpected contentment. 6 weeks ago, she would have laughed if someone had told her she'd find peace in something as simple as planting basil. "Someone's in a good mood," Irene observed, entering the greenhouse with a watering can. "It's a beautiful day," Natalie replied with a shrug, trying to sound casual. Nothing to do with a certain handsome farmhand who couldn't take his eyes off you at the bonfire." Natalie felt her cheeks warm. "Danny and I are just friends." "Honey, I've been around long enough to know what just friends looks like, and that ain't it," Irene chuckled. "Not that I blame you. Danny's different from the other workers. There's something about him." "What do you mean different?" Natalie asked, thinking of Martin's cryptic warning. Irene watered a row of seedlings before answering. "Can't put my finger on it exactly. He does the same work, eats the same food, lives in the same cabins as everyone else. But sometimes I catch him looking at the farm like he owns the place." She shrugged. "Plus, Martin treats him different, more like a partner than an employee." Natalie frowned, considering this. She'd noticed the easy familiarity between Danny and Martin, too. Maybe they knew each other before, or maybe Danny has some special farming expertise. "Maybe," Irene agreed, though she didn't sound convinced. "Just be careful, that's all I'm saying. Farm romances rarely last past harvest season, and you're leaving in what, 4.5 months?" 4 months and 12 days, Natalie said automatically, then winced at how that sounded. Irene gave her a knowing look. "Just make sure your heart knows that too." After Irene left, Natalie sat back on her heels, troubled. She was counting the days until she could return to Chicago, but the thought brought less excitement than it once had. Somehow, without her noticing, Sunshine Valley had begun to feel less like a prison and more like something else. Not home exactly, but not the punishment she'd initially considered it either. And then there was Danny. She couldn't deny the connection between them, growing stronger with each conversation, each shared smile. But Irene was right. What future could there possibly be for a city marketing executive and a career farmhand? Heavy thoughts for such a beautiful morning. Natalie looked up to find Danny watching her from the greenhouse entrance. His expression soft. Her heart did that now familiar flip at the sight of him. Just contemplating the mysteries of herb spacing, she lied, returning to her work. What brings you to my little corner of paradise? Actually, I wanted to ask you something, Danny said, suddenly looking nervous. He knelt beside her, close enough that she could smell the clean scent of his soap mixed with the earthy aroma that always seemed to surround him. There's a farmer's market in town this Saturday. I was wondering if you'd like to go with me. Natalie's hands stilled in the soil. Like a date? If you want it to be, he said carefully. Or just as friends exploring the wild excitement of rural commerce, your choice, she laughed despite herself. Well, when you make it sound so thrilling, is that a yes? Natalie looked into his hopeful eyes and knew she should say no. Getting involved with Danny would only complicate her already complicated life, but instead, she heard herself say, yes, I'd like that. The smile that lit up his face made her decision worth it, regardless of the consequences. A Saturday arrived with perfect weather and a nervous flutter in Natalie's stomach that she couldn't quite tamp down. She'd spent an embarrassing amount of time selecting an outfit from her limited wardrobe, finally settling on a simple sundress she'd impulsively packed from her old life. When Danny knocked on her door, she was surprised to see him wearing clean jeans and a button-down shirt instead of his usual work clothes. He'd even trimmed his beard. The effect was striking. Less rugged farmhand, more countryside gentleman. You look beautiful, he said, his eyes appreciative but respectful. You clean up pretty well yourself, she replied, trying to sound casual, despite the butterflies in her stomach. He drove them to town in his old pickup truck, the windows down and country music playing softly on the radio. The ease between them surprised Natalie. Despite their different backgrounds, conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by comfortable silences that didn't need to be filled. The farmer's market was bustling with activity when they arrived. Stalls lined the town square, offering everything from fresh produce to handmade crafts. Locals greeted Danny warmly, many expressing surprise at seeing him in town and with a lady friend. You're quite the local celebrity, Natalie observed after an elderly woman pinched Danny's cheek and told him he was finally showing some sense by finding a nice girl. Danny looked embarrassed. Small towns, everyone knows everyone's business. And what business do they think this is? Natalie asked boldly, gesturing between them. Danny's eyes met hers, serious despite his smile. What do you want it to be, Natalie? The directness of his question caught her off guard. Before she could formulate a response, they were interrupted by a sharp voice. Well, what a surprise. They turned to see a striking woman in designer sunglasses and an outfit that screamed city louder than anything Natalie had packed. The woman was staring at Danny with a mixture of shock and amusement. Vanessa, Danny said, his voice suddenly tight. What are you doing here? I might ask you the same thing, darling, the woman purred, removing her sunglasses to reveal calculating eyes. Playing farmer again? How rustic. Natalie looked between them, confused by the exchange and the sudden tension in Danny's posture. Natalie, this is Vanessa Hughes, Danny said stiffly. An old acquaintance. Vanessa, this is Natalie Price. Charmed, Vanessa said, barely glancing at Natalie before returning her attention to Danny. Your mother mentioned you were finding yourself on some farm, but I had no idea you'd gone native. Does she know you're dating the help? Natalie felt as though she'd been slapped. Excuse me? Danny stepped forward protectively. That's enough, Vanessa. What do you want? Just passing through on my way to the Anderson Charity Gala tonight, Vanessa replied smoothly. You remember the annual event your family hosts? The one you're conspicuously missing this year? She looked at Natalie again, this time with more interest. Does your little friend know who you really are, Danny? Or should I say, Daniel, we need to go, Danny interrupted sharply, grabbing Natalie's hand. Goodbye, Vanessa. Lovely meeting you, Natalie, Vanessa called after them as Danny pulled Natalie away. Do ask him about his trust fund sometime. Natalie allowed herself to be led through the market, her mind racing. When they reached a quiet corner, she pulled her hand free. What was that about? Who is she, and what did she mean about your mother and a trust fund? Danny's face was pale, his expression pained. Natalie, I can explain. Then explain, she demanded, crossing her arms. Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you haven't been honest about who you are. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she now recognized as a sign of his distress. Not here, he said quietly. Please, let me take you somewhere private and I'll tell you everything. Against her better judgment, Natalie nodded. The ride back was silent, the earlier ease between them replaced by a tension thick enough to cut. Instead of returning to the farm, Danny drove down a hidden road Natalie had never noticed before. It wound through a grove of trees before opening onto a clearing where a beautiful modern farmhouse stood. What is this place? Natalie asked as they parked. My home, Danny said simply, his voice heavy with resignation. Confusion clouded Natalie's features as he led her inside. The interior was stunning, open and airy with high ceilings, expensive furniture, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the farm. It was the home of someone with money, serious money. I don't understand, Natalie said, turning to face him. You live in the worker cabins. I've seen your cabin. I keep clothes there. Sometimes I sleep there. But this is where I actually live. Danny took a deep breath. My name is Daniel Anderson. I own Sunshine Valley Farm. Actually, I own Anderson Agricultural Industries, which owns Sunshine Valley and 12 other farms across 3 states. Natalie stared at him, the pieces slowly clicking into place. Anderson Agricultural Industries, the very company she was indebted to. The company she was working to repay. You're my boss, she whispered, the blood draining from her face. You're the reason I'm here. Technically, yes, Daniel admitted, but that's not why. You knew, Natalie cut him off, anger replacing shock. This whole time you knew who I was, what I owed, why I was here, and you pretended to be just another worker. Why? Was this some kind of sick game to you? No, Natalie, please. Did you laugh about it with Martin? Poor stupid city girl, thinking she was making friends with a farmhand when really he's the millionaire she owes money to? Billionaire, actually, Daniel corrected automatically, then winced at her expression. Sorry, that's not important. Look, yes, I knew who you were, but I didn't single you out because of your debt. The connection between us, that's real. Real? Natalie laughed bitterly. There's nothing real about a relationship built on lies. You've been playing a character this whole time. No, that's not true, Daniel insisted, stepping toward her. Danny is who I really am, who I want to be, the real me without the wealth and privilege and people wanting things from me. And what did you want from me? Natalie demanded, tears stinging her eyes. What was the end game here? Seduce the indebted employee? Add a notch to your belt? Daniel looked genuinely hurt. How can you think that after everything we've shared? I don't know what to think anymore, Natalie said, her voice breaking. I don't even know who you are. Before Daniel could respond, the front door opened and Martin walked in, stopping short at the scene before him. Bad timing, he muttered, backing toward the door. Oh no, perfect timing, Natalie said, wiping angrily at her tears. Were you in on this? Too, Martin, of course you were. You're not really the manager, are you? What role do you play in this little fantasy? I am the manager, Martin said carefully. But yes, I knew who Daniel really was. I tried to convince him to tell you the truth weeks ago. How noble, Natalie spat. She turned back to Daniel. I want to go back to my cabin now. Natalie, please, let me explain everything. There's more you need to know. I've heard enough, she interrupted. Either drive me back or I'll walk. Daniel's shoulders slumped in defeat. I'll drive you. The ride back to the workers' area was painfully silent. When they reached her cabin, Natalie got out without a word, slamming the truck door behind her. She waited until Daniel's truck disappeared before letting the tears fall freely. How could she have been so blind? So stupid. She'd been starting to fall for him, for a lie. And worst of all, he was the very person to whom she owed a small fortune. The humiliation was almost as painful as the heartbreak. Daniel sat in his darkened living room, a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand. The day had started with such promise, only to end in complete disaster. Natalie's face, when she'd realized the truth, haunted him, shock giving way to hurt and then hardening into anger. "I warned you," Martin said, sitting across from him. "I told you the longer you waited, the worse it would be." "Not helpful, Martin," Daniel growled. "What are you going to do now?" Daniel set down his glass. "I don't know. Give her space, I guess. Then try to explain." "So you might not have that luxury," Martin said grimly, sliding a tablet across the coffee table. "Peterson sent this over while you were out. Apparently, the legal department has been reviewing all special payment arrangements, including Ms. Price's." Daniel picked up the tablet and scanned the document, his frown deepening. "They want to accelerate her repayment. Why? New company policy for debts over a certain threshold. The board approved it last quarter." "I'm the CEO," Daniel snapped. "I didn't approve this." "You weren't exactly available for the vote," Martin reminded him. "Your little identity crisis has consequences beyond your love life, you know." Daniel ignored the jab, continuing to read. "This says if she can't meet the new payment schedule, they'll pursue legal action." "That's insane. She's already working here to pay it off. According to this, her labor contract doesn't cover the full amount. Not even close." Daniel stood and began pacing. "I'll override it. I'm still the majority shareholder." "You could," Martin agreed. "But that would require explaining to the board why. You're making an exception for one specific debtor. I'm not sure that's a conversation you want to have." Daniel stopped pacing, a sinking feeling in his stomach. "When do these new terms take effect?" "Monday morning. The notice will be delivered. To Ms. Price tomorrow." "Perfect," Daniel muttered, running a hand over his face. "So not only does she hate me for lying about who I am, but now she'll think I'm punishing her for rejecting me." "It's not great timing," Martin admitted. "What are you going to do?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe it's better this way," he said finally. "Clear legal boundaries between us. No more pretending, no more lies." "You're giving up on her?" "I'm respecting her wishes," Daniel corrected, though the words tasted bitter. "She doesn't want anything to do with Daniel Anderson, and I can't blame her." Martin studied his friend's dejected expression. "You really care about her, don't you?" "More than I thought possible," Daniel admitted quietly. "Which is why I have to let her go." The next morning, Natalie was still reeling from the revelations of the previous day when a courier arrived at her cabin with an official-looking envelope. The return address made her stomach drop. Anderson Agricultural Industries Legal Department. With trembling fingers, she opened it, scanning the contents with growing disbelief. The company was changing the terms of her repayment plan, effectively doubling what she owed per month. There was no way she could meet these new demands with her current salary. The letter concluded with a cold warning. Failure to comply would result in legal action, potentially including garnishment of future wages and damage to her credit score. "You bastard," Natalie whispered, anger burning through her veins. This had to be Daniel's doing, his revenge for her rejection yesterday. He couldn't have her, so he'd make her pay. Literally. She stormed out of her cabin, the letter clutched in her fist, and marched toward the main house. Workers stared as she passed, but she barely noticed them. Her focus was singular, confronting the man who had lied to her, humiliated her, and was now trying to ruin her financially. When she reached the hidden road that led to Daniel's home, she hesitated only briefly before continuing. The house came into view, its modern lines and large windows no longer beautiful to her eyes, but a symbol of the wealth and power Daniel had hidden from her. She pounded on the front door, her anger building with each second. When it finally opened, she shoved the letter at Daniel's chest. "Is this your idea of revenge?" Daniel looked genuinely confused as he glanced at the letter. "Natalie, I didn't—" "Save it," she snapped. "I get it. I wouldn't fall for your little farmer act. So now you're using your power to punish me. Well, congratulations, you win. I can't pay this, and we both know it. Natalie, please come inside, Daniel said softly. Let me explain. This isn't what you think. I'm done with your explanations and your lies, Natalie said, her voice breaking, despite her efforts to stay strong. Just tell me what you want from me. What will it take for you to call off your legal dogs? Daniel looked stricken. I would never use your debt to manipulate you. That's not who I am. I don't know who you are, Natalie replied. That's the problem. Before Daniel could respond, a sleek black car pulled up the driveway. A distinguished-looking older man in an expensive suit stepped out, his expression severe. Daniel, the man called, approaching them. We need to talk. The board is concerned about your extended absence and unusual behavior. Daniel tensed visibly. Jeffrey, this isn't a good time. The man, Jeffrey, seemed to notice Natalie for the first time. His eyes narrowed. And who might this be? Natalie Price, she answered before Daniel could speak. One of your company's debtors. I was just discussing the new repayment terms with Mr. Anderson. Jeffrey's eyebrows rose. Ah, yes, the new policy. Essential for maintaining the company's financial health. He looked at Daniel sharply. Though I'm surprised you're handling such matters personally. Isn't that what the legal department is for? Ms. Price is a special case, Daniel said carefully. I'll bet, Natalie muttered under her breath. Jeffrey looked between them, his expression calculating. I see. Well, Ms. Price, I'm Jeffrey Peterson, CFO, of Anderson Agricultural Industries. I assure you these new terms apply to all debtors, not just you. It's nothing personal. It feels pretty personal from where I'm standing, Natalie replied. Natalie, Daniel said softly. Please, let's discuss this privately. There's nothing to discuss, she said, stepping back. I'll figure something out, I always do. Actually, Jeffrey interjected, if meeting the increased payments is a concern, there might be another solution. He looked at Daniel, something unspoken passing between them. The company sometimes offers alternative arrangements for special cases. Perhaps Mr. Anderson could explain the options. Daniel's jaw tightened. Jeffrey, that won't be necessary. On the contrary, Jeffrey insisted. As CFO, it's my duty to ensure all debts are settled efficiently. And Ms. Price's case has already drawn attention due to its unusual nature. He turned to Natalie. I suggest you hear Mr. Anderson out. The legal alternatives might be less appealing. With that thinly veiled threat hanging in the air, Jeffrey excused himself, saying he would wait for Daniel inside to discuss more pressing company matters. Once they were alone, Natalie looked at Daniel expectantly. Well, what are these alternative arrangements he mentioned? Daniel sighed heavily. It's not what you're thinking. There's a clause in your original contract that offers an accelerated repayment option through additional legal obligations to the company. What does that mean in English? It means you could become legally bound to the company in a more permanent capacity, Daniel explained reluctantly. Essentially, you'd sign a longer-term contract with specific performance requirements. Natalie's eyes widened as understanding dawned. You want me to sign my life away to your company? For how long? 2 years, Daniel admitted, but you'd have better housing, better pay, and the debt would be considered paid in full at the end of the term. What's the catch? What would I have to do? Daniel hesitated. You'd work directly with company executives on special projects. Your marketing background would be valuable. And I'd be even more at your mercy than I already am, Natalie concluded bitterly. Is that what this is about? Finding a way to keep me here, under your control? No, Daniel insisted. This isn't my doing, Natalie. The board implemented these policies while I was distracted. I'm trying to find the best solution for you. The best solution for me would have been honesty from the start, Natalie said, her anger giving way to exhaustion. Now I have to choose between financial ruin or indentured servitude to a man who lied to me for months. It's not servitude, Daniel protested. You'd be a regular employee with all the rights and benefits that entails. Except the right to leave, Natalie pointed out. Because I'd be contractually obligated to stay. Daniel couldn't deny it. I'm sorry it's come to this. I never wanted to trap you. Natalie looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for any sign of the Danny she'd begun to care for. But all she saw was Daniel Anderson, Billionaire CEO, a stranger wearing a familiar face. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course," Daniel agreed quickly. "Take all the time you need. The new terms don't technically take effect until tomorrow." Natalie nodded stiffly and turned to leave. Daniel called after her, his voice soft but urgent. "Natalie, for what it's worth, everything between us was real. I never pretended to feel anything I didn't." She paused but didn't turn around. "The problem is, Daniel, I don't know what's real anymore. And I'm not sure you do either." As she walked away, Natalie felt the weight of her impossible choice bearing down on her. She had less than 24 hours to decide her future: financial devastation or legal bondage to Anderson Agricultural Industries and its deceptive CEO. One thing was certain: her time at Sunshine Valley Farm had just become significantly more complicated than she'd ever imagined, and the quiet farmhand she'd begun to fall for had turned out to be the very man who held her fate in his hands. Natalie paced the small confines of her cabin, the legal document spread out on her bed. The ticking of her alarm clock seemed to grow louder with each passing minute, a reminder that time was running out. By morning, she needed to make a decision that would shape the next 2 years of her life. A knock at her door startled her. She opened it to find Irene standing there, concern etched on her kind face. "You missed dinner," Irene said, holding out a wrapped plate. "Thought you might be hungry." "Thanks," Natalie said, accepting the food though she had no appetite. "I've been distracted." Irene studied her face. "How you look like you've seen a ghost. What happened? Is it about Danny?" The name sent a fresh wave of pain through Natalie's chest. "You could say that." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in. I could use some advice." Once Irene was settled at the small table, Natalie told her everything: about Danny really being Daniel Anderson, about the debt, and about the impossible choice she now faced. "Sweet heaven above," Irene whispered when Natalie finished. "I knew there was something different about him, but this—" She shook her head in disbelief. "What should I do?" Natalie asked, slumping into the chair opposite Irene. "If I don't sign this new contract, I'll be buried in debt I can't possibly repay. But if I do sign it, I'm legally tied to a man who lied to my face for months." Irene was quiet for a moment, considering. "Can I ask you something personal?" At Natalie's nod, she continued. "Before you found out who he really was, how did you feel about him?" "About Danny?" Natalie's throat tightened. "I was falling for him," she admitted quietly. "He was kind, hard-working, thoughtful, nothing like the men I dated in Chicago. With him, I felt like I could be myself. And now? Now I don't know what was real and what was an act," Natalie said bitterly. "Was he laughing at me the whole time? The spoiled city girl learning to get her hands dirty? I've known a lot of men in my time," Irene said slowly. "Good ones, bad ones, and everything in between. And one thing I know for sure: no man, not even a billionaire, works from sunup to sundown in the fields if he doesn't have to, not unless he truly loves it." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe Danny is the real person and Daniel Anderson is the act," Irene suggested. "People with money like that, they're surrounded by yes men and opportunists their whole lives. Maybe pretending to be a regular person was the only way he could find something genuine." Natalie considered this. It matched what Daniel had tried to tell her, that Danny was who he really was, who he wanted to be. "Even if that's true," she said, "he still lied to me. He knew who I was, knew about my debt to his company, and he said nothing." "Oh, he was wrong," Irene agreed firmly. "No question about that. The question is whether it's the kind of wrong you can forgive or the kind you can't." Natalie stared at the legal document on her bed. "I don't know." "Well, from where I'm sitting, you've got 3 options," Irene said practically. "You can sign his contract and stick around for 2 years, giving yourself time to figure out if there's anything worth salvaging. You can refuse, go back to Chicago, and spend the next decade digging out of debt. Or what?" A small smile played on Irene's lips. "Or you can make him sweat a little. Negotiate. You were a marketing executive, right? So market yourself, make him a counteroffer." Something sparked in Natalie's eyes, a glimmer of her old confidence that had been buried beneath humiliation and betrayal. "You're right. This is a negotiation, not an ultimatum, and he needs me to agree as much as I need this debt resolved." "That's the spirit," Irene said, patting Natalie's hand. "Don't let him off easy. Make him earn your forgiveness, if that's what you decide to give." After Irene left, Natalie pulled out a notebook and began drafting her terms. If Daniel Anderson wanted her to be legally bound to his company for 2 years, she would make sure. It was on her conditions, not his. By midnight, she had a plan. And for the first time since discovering Daniel's deception, she felt a sense of control returning. Tomorrow would be a new day and a new beginning, one way or another. Daniel hadn't slept at all. He'd spent the night alternating between pacing his living room and staring at his phone, hoping Natalie would call with her decision. When morning came without word from her, anxiety gnawed at his stomach. "You look terrible," Martin observed, entering with coffee. "Still no word?" Daniel shook his head, accepting the mug gratefully. "What if she chooses to leave to deal with the debt from Chicago? Then you respect her decision," Martin said firmly. "You've done enough damage trying to control outcomes." Daniel winced at the truth in his friend's words. "I never meant for it to go this far. I just wanted to find someone who saw me for me." "And did you?" Martin asked. "Or did you just create another mask to hide behind?" Before Daniel could answer, his phone rang. His heart leaped when he saw Natalie's name on the screen. "Natalie," he answered quickly. "Thank you for calling." "I'm not calling to chat." Her voice came through, cool and professional. "I've made a decision about your contract offer." Daniel's grip tightened on the phone. "And? I'll discuss it with you in person. At your house." 1 hour. The call ended before he could respond. Daniel stared at the phone, both relieved she was willing to meet and terrified of what her decision might be. "Well," Martin prompted, "she's coming here in an hour." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "What do I do?" "You listen," Martin advised. "Really listen. And then you accept whatever she decides, even if it's not what you want to hear." The hour crawled by, each minute stretching endlessly. Daniel changed his clothes twice, straightened the already immaculate living room, and nearly wore a path in his floor with his pacing. When the doorbell finally rang, he took a deep breath before opening it. Natalie stood on his doorstep looking composed and professional in a simple blouse and jeans, a far cry from the emotional woman who had confronted him the day before. She carried a folder and wore an expression that gave nothing away. "Thank you for coming," Daniel said, stepping aside to let her in. "Let's get straight to business," Natalie replied, walking to his dining table and spreading out several papers. "I've reviewed your contract offer, and I have some counter-proposals." Daniel blinked in surprise. This wasn't what he'd expected. Counter-proposals? "If I'm going to be legally bound to your company for 2 years, it's going to be on terms that benefit me as well as you," Natalie said briskly. "First, I want a real job, not some made-up position to keep me close. I want to use my marketing skills and have actual responsibilities." Daniel nodded slowly, taking a seat across from her. "That's reasonable. We could use someone with your expertise in our marketing department. Second," Natalie continued, "I want separate living arrangements. Not these worker cabins, but not here with you either. Something independent." Another nod from Daniel. "There's a cottage on the east side of the property. It's small but comfortable. It would be yours for the duration of the contract. Third, I want a non-disclosure agreement. When this is over, I don't want you or your company coming after me if I choose to write about my experiences." Daniel frowned. "You want to write about this?" "I don't know what I want yet," Natalie said honestly, "but I want the freedom to tell my story if I choose to." "Anything else?" Daniel asked quietly. Natalie met his eyes directly. "Yes, I want the truth. No more lies, no more pretending. If we're going to work together for 2 years, I need to know who I'm really dealing with." The request hung between them, weighted with meaning beyond the professional arrangement they were discussing. Daniel understood she wasn't just talking about work. "Agreed," he said softly. "No more lies." "Then we have a deal," Natalie said, sliding a revised contract across the table. "I took the liberty of making the changes. Have your lawyers review it if you want, but these are my terms. Daniel glanced at the document but didn't reach for it. And what about us? Is there still an us to discuss? Natalie's professional demeanor faltered slightly. I don't know, Daniel. You hurt me. You lied about who you were. Let me believe. You were someone you're not. I never lied about who I am, Daniel insisted quietly. Just what I am. The man you got to know, his values, his thoughts, his feelings, that was all real. Maybe, Natalie conceded, but it will take time for me to trust that. Right now, let's just focus on the business arrangement. The rest, we'll see. It wasn't what Daniel had hoped for, but it was more than he'd feared. She was staying, they would have time, it wasn't over. I'll have the legal department formalize this today, he promised, finally. Taking the contract. Good, I'll start moving my things to the cottage tomorrow. Natalie stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. I don't want special treatment from anyone else on the farm. As far as the other workers are concerned, I'm just an employee who got promoted to the marketing department. What about Martin? He already knows everything. Martin can know, but no one else. Natalie's expression softened slightly. I don't want them thinking I slept my way into a better position. Daniel winced at the implication. I would never let anyone think that. Nevertheless, that's how I want it, Natalie insisted. Clean slate, fresh start. Nobody needs to know. About whatever this was between us. Whatever this was, Daniel repeated, hurt evident in his voice. Natalie, what I feel for you is real. That hasn't changed. For a moment, Natalie's carefully constructed walls seemed to waver, but then she straightened her shoulders. I need time, Daniel. Can you understand that? He nodded reluctantly. I'll give you all the time you need, but I'm not giving up on what we could have. A small smile touched her lips, the first he'd seen since the farmer's market. I wouldn't expect you to. You're nothing if not persistent. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. The cottage was exactly as Daniel had described. Small, but comfortable, with rustic charm and modern amenities. Natalie spent her first day there unpacking her few belongings and trying to make the space feel like her own. A knock at the door revealed Martin, holding a housewarming gift of wine and bread. Traditional offering for a new home, he explained, with a friendly smile. May you never know hunger or thirst. Thank you, Natalie said, accepting the gifts and inviting him in. It's a lovely place. Daniel renovated it himself last year, Martin said, glancing around appreciatively. He likes working with his hands more than he lets on. You two have known each other a long time, haven't you? Natalie asked, pouring them each a glass of wine. Martin nodded, accepting his glass. Since college, I was the scholarship kid. He was the heir to a fortune. Unlikely friends, but it worked. Was he always so? Natalie struggled to find the right word. Complicated, Martin suggested with a wry smile. Yes and no. Daniel's always felt trapped by his family's expectations and his own privilege. He's spent his life trying to prove he's more than just a rich man's son. By pretending to be poor? Natalie asked skeptically. Martin shrugged. It's not the method I would have chosen, but I understand why he did it. When people know you're wealthy, they treat you differently. They want things from you or they assume things about you. Daniel wanted to be judged on his own merits. So he lied, Natalie said flatly. He omitted, Martin corrected gently. The man you got to know, the one who works hard, who loves this land, who cares about the people who work for him, that's the real Daniel. The suits and board meetings and business dinners, that's the act. Natalie sipped her wine thoughtfully. You're very loyal to him. He's earned it, Martin said simply. Daniel is a good man who made a bad choice. Don't let that one choice define him in your eyes. After Martin left, Natalie stood on her small porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The farm stretched before her, beautiful in the fading light. Somewhere out there, Daniel was probably watching the same sunset. Despite her anger and hurt, she couldn't deny the pang of longing she felt. She missed the easy conversations with Danny, the shared smiles, the connection that had been building between them. She missed the simplicity of falling for a farmhand before reality had complicated everything. But that simplicity had been an illusion, and now she had to figure out if what remained, The complicated, messy truth was worth fighting for. Daniel threw himself into work, trying to distract himself from thoughts of Natalie. He divided his time between his executive responsibilities and regular farm work, finding more peace in the latter. There was something satisfying about physical labor that board meetings could never provide. A week after Natalie moved into the cottage, Daniel was working in the apple orchard when Jeffrey Peterson found him, looking distinctly out of place in his designer suit. "This has gone on long enough, Daniel," Jeffrey said without preamble. "The board is concerned about your continued unorthodox behavior." Daniel continued picking apples. "The company's performing well, isn't it?" "That's not the point," Jeffrey insisted. "You're the face of Anderson Agricultural Industries. You have responsibilities beyond manual labor." "I'm aware of my responsibilities," Daniel replied coolly, "and I'm fulfilling them. The difference is, I'm also doing what makes me happy." Jeffrey's expression tightened. "And what about the price woman? Is she making you happy too?" Daniel's hands stilled. "Careful, Jeffrey." "The board has questions about her sudden promotion to the marketing department," Jeffrey continued, undeterred. "It looks inappropriate. Ms. Price is qualified for the position," Daniel said, his voice dangerously calm. "Her personal connection to me is irrelevant." "Is it?" Jeffrey raised an eyebrow. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've created a special position for a woman you're involved with. A woman, I might add, who owes this company a significant sum of money." Daniel turned to face him fully, anger simmering just beneath the surface. "Ms. Price's contract includes full repayment of her debt through her service to the company. Everything is above board and legally sound. If the board has concerns, they can address them with me directly at the next meeting." Jeffrey studied him for a moment. "You've changed, Daniel, and not for the better. Your father built this company on focus and discipline, not sentimentality." "My father built this company by understanding that people matter more than profit margins," Daniel corrected him. "Something you seem to have forgotten." "People like Natalie Price?" Jeffrey asked with a knowing smirk. Daniel stepped closer, his voice low. "Don't say her name again. My personal life is none of your business." "It is when it affects the company," Jeffrey insisted. "The board won't stand for this much longer, Daniel. Either you start acting like the CEO you're supposed to be, or they'll find someone who will." With that parting threat, Jeffrey turned and walked away, leaving Daniel seething. He'd known there would be pushback from the more traditional board members about his unconventional approach to leadership, but he hadn't expected such direct opposition. More troubling was Jeffrey's interest in Natalie. Daniel made a mental note to have Martin look into Jeffrey's recent activities. Something about the CFO's behavior felt calculated, as if he were looking for leverage. Daniel's protective instincts surged. He would need to warn Natalie to be careful around Jeffrey. The thought gave him a legitimate reason to see her, the first since she'd moved into the cottage. Despite the circumstances, he couldn't help feeling a flutter of anticipation at the prospect of speaking with her again. Thais and Natalie's first week in the marketing department had been both challenging and refreshing. After months of physical labor, returning to her professional strengths felt like coming home. She'd already identified several opportunities for Anderson Agricultural Industries to improve its brand messaging and community outreach. She was reviewing analytics reports in her new office when a knock interrupted her concentration. Looking up, she was surprised to see Daniel standing in the doorway, the first time she'd seen him since moving into the cottage. "Do you have a minute?" he asked, uncharacteristically hesitant. "Of course," she replied, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. The formality between them felt strange after the intimacy they'd shared as Danny and Natalie. Daniel closed the door before sitting. "I wanted to see how you're settling in, and to warn you about something." Natalie's guard immediately went up. "Warn me about what?" "Jeffrey Peterson," Daniel said, his expression serious. "He's asking questions about your position here, implying that your promotion was inappropriate." "Because of our relationship," Natalie concluded, a blush heating her cheeks despite herself. It was the first time either of them had directly acknowledged that there had been a relationship. Daniel nodded. "I'm concerned he may approach you directly, try to get information he can use against both of us." "What kind of information?" "Anything that suggests your position wasn't earned on merit," Daniel explained, Or that I've shown you special treatment because of personal feelings. Natalie leaned back in her chair, studying him. Have you shown me special treatment, I mean? Daniel met her gaze directly. I gave you an opportunity, but you earned the position. Your qualifications speak for themselves. The work you've done this week alone proves that. His confidence in her abilities warmed something inside Natalie that had been cold since the farmer's market revelation. Thank you for the warning. I'll be careful around him. There's something else, Daniel said, hesitating. The board is questioning my leadership style. There could be an attempt to force me out if I don't conform to their expectations. Which are? More suits, fewer fields, Daniel said with a wry smile. They want a CEO who acts the part, not one who works alongside his employees. Would it be so bad? Natalie asked. Going back to being just Daniel Anderson, billionaire CEO? It would mean giving up the part of myself I value most, he answered honestly. The part that connects me to this land and the people who work it. The part I got to know as Danny, Natalie said softly. Daniel's eyes warmed. Yes. A moment of understanding passed between them, a bridge across the chasm that had opened when his deception was revealed. Why are you telling me this? Natalie asked. Because it might affect your position here, Daniel explained. If I'm ousted, your contract could be in jeopardy. I wanted you to be prepared for that possibility. Natalie appreciated his candor. What can I do to help? The question clearly surprised him. You want to help me? I want to help myself, Natalie clarified. My contract is with your company. I need it to remain valid. So yes, if there's something I can do to strengthen your position, I'm willing to consider it. Daniel thought for a moment. Actually, there might be. The board responds to results, and you've already identified several marketing opportunities that could improve our public image and community relations. If you could develop those into a formal proposal. I can do that, Natalie agreed. I'll have something for you by the end of the week. Thank you, Daniel said sincerely. He stood to leave, but paused at the door. Natalie? For what it's worth, I miss our conversations, the real ones, not the business talk. The simple admission touched her more than any grand gesture could have. I miss them too, she confessed quietly. A hopeful smile lit his face. Maybe we could have dinner sometime. Just to discuss your marketing ideas, of course. Natalie found herself smiling back. Maybe. Let me think about it. After he left, Natalie sat at her desk, emotions warring within her. She was still hurt by his deception, still wary of trusting him again, but she couldn't deny that the connection between them remained, a persistent tug that refused to be ignored. The practical part of her recognized that helping Daniel secure his position was in her best interest. The contract she'd negotiated was fair, and she doubted she'd get such favorable terms under different leadership. But there was another part, a part she was reluctant to acknowledge, that simply wanted to be near him again, to see if what they'd started to build could be salvaged, or if it had been irreparably damaged by lies and revelations. One thing was certain, the next 2 years would be anything but simple. The farm's annual harvest festival was approaching, a tradition that brought together workers, local farmers, and community members for a day of celebration. It was the perfect opportunity for Natalie to implement some of her marketing ideas, showcasing Anderson agricultural industries' community focus and sustainable practices. She threw herself into the preparations, coordinating with local vendors, arranging for press coverage, and designing a new farm-to-table experience that highlighted the quality of Sunshine Valley's produce. The work was rewarding and kept her mind occupied, preventing her from dwelling too much on her complicated feelings for Daniel. They had settled into a professional rhythm, meeting weekly to discuss her marketing initiatives. Each meeting was cordial but charged with unspoken emotions, both of them carefully maintaining the boundaries Natalie had established. 2 days before the festival, Natalie was working late in her office when Martin appeared at her door. The decorations for the main tent arrived, he announced. Want to come see? Natalie welcomed the break and followed him to the large field where the festival would be held. Workers were setting up tents and booths, the skeleton of what would soon be a vibrant celebration taking shape. It's going to be beautiful, Natalie said, surveying the progress. I think this year's festival might be the best yet. Daniel says the same thing, Martin replied. He's been telling everyone how your marketing ideas have taken it to the next level. Natalie felt a flutter of pleasure at the praise. He's been very supportive of my work. He's proud of you, Martin said simply. We all are. You've brought a fresh perspective to a company that desperately needed it. As they walked among the half-constructed booths, Martin casually asked, "So how are things between you two? Any thawing of the ice?" "We're professional," Natalie answered carefully. Martin chuckled. "That's not what I asked." Natalie sighed. "It's complicated, Martin. He lied to me for months." "He did," Martin agreed. "And yet here you are working alongside him, helping him keep the company his family built." "That's self-preservation," Natalie insisted. "My contract depends on his position as CEO." "Is that the only reason?" Martin asked gently. Before Natalie could respond, a commotion near the main entrance caught their attention. A sleek convertible had pulled up, and a familiar figure was stepping out. Vanessa Hughes, looking as polished and out of place as she had at the farmer's market. "What is she doing here?" Natalie muttered. "Nothing good, I'd wager," Martin replied grimly. "Vanessa and Daniel have history." "What kind of history?" Natalie asked, trying to sound merely curious rather than jealous. "The kind that ends with a prenup being signed and then disputed when Daniel discovered she was more interested in his bank account than his company," Martin explained. "They were engaged briefly about 2 years ago." The information hit Natalie harder than she expected. She'd known Daniel likely had past relationships, but hearing about an engagement, and to someone as glamorous as Vanessa, made her feel suddenly inadequate. "I should go say hello," Martin said, starting toward Vanessa. "You coming?" "I'll pass," Natalie replied. "I have work to finish." As she turned to leave, she glanced back to see Vanessa spot Martin and wave, her perfect smile flashing in the afternoon sun. They were too far away for Natalie to hear their conversation, but Vanessa's animated gestures and confident posture spoke volumes. Natalie returned to her office, trying to focus on her work, but finding her mind continually drifting to thoughts of Daniel and Vanessa together. Had he loved her? Did he still have feelings for her? Was that why she was here, to win him back? "Stop it," Natalie told herself firmly. "It doesn't matter. You and Daniel are just colleagues now." But even as she said the words, she knew they weren't entirely true. Despite her best efforts to maintain distance, despite the hurt and betrayal, she couldn't deny that her feelings for Daniel, or Danny or whoever he really was, hadn't disappeared. They had merely been buried beneath layers of pride and self-protection. The question now was whether she was brave enough to excavate them, to risk her heart again with a man who had already broken it once. And with Vanessa's unexpected appearance, the stakes suddenly felt much higher. The Harvest Festival would bring them all together in 2 days' time. Whatever Vanessa's intentions were, whatever Daniel felt, whatever Natalie decided, it would all come to a head under the autumn sky. Amidst the celebration of abundance and growth. How fitting, Natalie thought wryly, that her heart's harvest might be gathered at the same time as the farm's. Whether that harvest would yield bitter fruit or sweet remained to be seen. The morning of the Harvest Festival dawned clear and bright, with just enough autumn crispness in the air to make it feel festive. Natalie had been up since dawn, making final preparations and checking details. This was her first major project for Anderson Agricultural Industries, and she was determined to make it perfect. "Everything looks amazing," Irene said, joining Natalie, by the main tent where local artisans were setting up their displays. "You've really transformed the festival this year." "Thanks," Natalie replied, checking items off her clipboard. "I just hope it all goes smoothly." "Speaking of smooth," Irene said, lowering her voice, "have you seen who's staying at the main house? That city woman from the farmer's market. Vanessa something. Natalie's." Stomach tightened. "She's staying with Daniel?" "Arrived yesterday with enough luggage for a month," Irene confirmed. "Martin says she claims to be here for the festival, but if you ask me, she's here to stake her claim." "Her claim to what?" Natalie asked, trying to sound casual. Irene gave her a knowing look. "To whom, you mean? Daniel may have been playing poor man when you met him, but he's still one of the most eligible bachelors in 3 states. And from what I hear, Miss Designer Shoes had her hooks in him once before." Natalie forced herself to focus on her clipboard. It's none of my business who Daniel sees, isn't it? Irene challenged gently. The way you two look at each other. When you think no one's watching says otherwise. Before Natalie could respond, Martin approached, looking harried. Natalie, we have a problem. The band cancelled. Their van broke down 50 miles from here. What? Natalie's carefully constructed. Calm shattered. But they're supposed to play in 4 hours. I know, Martin said grimly. I've been calling replacements, but everyone's booked for other harvest festivals today. Natalie took a deep breath, thinking quickly. What about local talent? There must be someone in town who could fill in. I might know a few people, Irene offered. There's a group that plays at the church sometimes. Not professionals, but they're good. Call them, Natalie decided. And Martin, see if any of the farm workers are musical. We'll piece together something if we have to. As they scattered to handle the crisis, Natalie spotted a familiar figure striding across the grounds. Daniel, looking every inch the confident CEO in casual but expensive clothes. Her heart did a traitorous flip at the sight of him. I heard, "I built the band," he said, reaching her. "Anything I can do to help?" "We're handling it," Natalie assured him, trying to maintain professional distance despite her awareness of his presence. "Irene's contacting some local musicians." Daniel nodded, his eyes taking in the festival grounds. "This is incredible, Natalie. You've done an amazing job." His genuine admiration warmed her despite herself. "Thank you. But maybe hold the praise until we see if we can find replacement music." "It will be perfect regardless," Daniel insisted. "The whole town is talking about the festival. You've created something special here." Natalie allowed herself a small smile. "We all did. It's a team effort." "Always deflecting compliments," Daniel observed with a familiar half-smile that reminded her painfully of their early days together. Some things haven't changed. The moment of connection was interrupted by a lilting voice calling Daniel's name. They turned to see Vanessa approaching, looking impossibly glamorous in designer jeans and a silk blouse that probably cost more than Natalie's entire wardrobe. "Danny, darling, there you are," Vanessa purred, linking her arm through his. "You promised to show me around the festival grounds this morning, remember?" Daniel looked uncomfortable at the contact. "Vanessa, you remember Natalie Price? She's the marketing director who organized the festival." Vanessa's eyes swept over. Natalie dismissively. "Oh yes, the little debtor. I hear you've moved up in the world since we last met. How resourceful of you." The implication was clear, and Natalie felt her cheeks burn with anger and humiliation. "Ms. Hughes," she acknowledged, stiffly, "I hope you enjoy the festival. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a music crisis to solve." As she walked away, she heard Vanessa's tinkling laugh and felt a stab of insecurity. How could she compete with someone like that? Vanessa was beautiful, wealthy, and shared Daniel's privileged background. They made sense together in a way that Natalie and Daniel never would. "Don't let her get to you," Martin said, appearing at her side. "Vanessa Hughes is all shine and no substance. Daniel found that out the hard way." "It doesn't matter," Natalie insisted, quickening her pace. "Daniel's personal life is none of my concern." "Isn't it?" Martin asked, echoing Irene's earlier question. Natalie stopped walking and faced him directly. "Martin, what are you and Irene trying to do here? Push me and Daniel together. It's not that simple. He lied to me for months." "He did," Martin agreed, "and he was wrong. But I've known Daniel for 15 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Not even Vanessa. If that's true, then why is she here? Why is she staying at his house?" Martin sighed. "Because she invited herself, and Daniel's too polite to throw her out. But trust me, her presence is not welcome. In fact..." He hesitated, then continued more cautiously, "I think she might be working with Jeffrey Peterson." Natalie frowned. "Working with him how?" "I've seen them talking several times, very privately, and her sudden appearance right when Jeffrey's challenging Daniel's leadership seems convenient." A protective instinct flared in Natalie's chest. "You think they're plotting against Daniel? Why would Vanessa do that?" "Hell hath no fury," Martin quoted with a grim smile. "Daniel left her when he discovered she was more interested in his money than him. She didn't take it well. Natalie processed this information, her marketing mind quickly connecting dots. If Jeffrey wants to replace Daniel as CEO, he'd need board support. Having Daniel's ex-fiancée bad-mouthing him could help sway any fence-sitters. Exactly, Martin nodded. And Vanessa gets revenge plus whatever Jeffrey promised her. We need to warn Daniel, Natalie said immediately. I've tried, Martin admitted, but he doesn't want to believe it. He thinks I'm being paranoid. Natalie squared her shoulders. Decision made. Then we'll need proof. Keep an eye on them today. If you see anything suspicious, let me know. Martin grinned. Yes, boss. As he walked away, Natalie felt a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever her personal feelings about Daniel's deception, she couldn't stand by and watch while others schemed against him. He might have lied about his identity, but at least his motives had been understandable, if misguided. Vanessa and Jeffrey's apparent plot seemed far more sinister. First, however, she had a festival to save, one crisis at a time. By early afternoon, the Harvest Festival was in full swing. Families filled the grounds, children laughing as they participated in games and activities. Food vendors offered local specialties, and the artisan marketplace buzzed with commerce. In the main tent, the hastily assembled band, a mix of local church musicians and surprisingly talented farm workers, played lively tunes that had people dancing. Natalie allowed herself a moment of pride as she surveyed the scene. Despite the last-minute music crisis, the festival was a resounding success. Local media were covering the event, and the farm-to-table demonstration area was packed with interested visitors. You should be proud, a voice said beside her, and Natalie turned to find Daniel's mother, Eleanor Anderson, standing there. They had been briefly introduced earlier in the day, but this was their first real conversation. Mrs. Anderson, Natalie said, slightly flustered. I hope you're enjoying the festival. Immensely, the elegant older woman replied. And please call me Eleanor. Mrs. Anderson makes me feel ancient. Up close, Natalie could see where Daniel got his striking eyes and warm smile. Despite her obvious wealth and refinement, Eleanor had an approachable quality that put Natalie at ease. Daniel tells me this was primarily your vision, Eleanor continued. I must say you've breathed new life into a tradition that was becoming rather stale. Thank you, Natalie said sincerely. It was a team effort, though. Everyone contributed ideas. Eleanor's eyes twinkled. And modest, too. No wonder my son is so taken with you. Natalie felt her cheeks warm. Mrs. Anderson? Eleanor, I think you may have the wrong impression. Daniel and I are colleagues, nothing more. Really? Eleanor arched an elegant eyebrow. That's not what his eyes say when he looks at you, and I've known my son long enough to recognize when he's smitten. Before Natalie could formulate a response, Eleanor continued, May I speak frankly, Ms. Price? Natalie, please. And yes, of course. Daniel told me everything about his deception, your debt, the contract, all of it. Eleanor's direct gaze held no judgment, just honest assessment. What he did was foolish and hurtful, and I told him as much. But I understand why he did it. You do? Natalie asked. Surprised, Eleanor nodded. When you've spent your life surrounded by people who value you for your bank account rather than your character, authenticity becomes precious. Daniel wanted to know if someone could care for him without the trappings of wealth. It was poorly executed, but the desire was genuine. Natalie considered this perspective. It aligned with what Daniel had tried to explain and what Martin had told her. I understand his reasoning, she admitted, but trust is hard to rebuild once it's broken. Indeed it is, Eleanor agreed, but sometimes the things most worth having require the hardest work. She glanced across the grounds to where Daniel was showing a group of children how to press apple cider. My son has many faults, but a lack of sincerity isn't one of them. When he cares deeply. A commotion near the entrance diverted their attention. Jeffrey Peterson had arrived with several men in expensive suits, board members, Natalie guessed. Speaking of insincerity, Eleanor muttered, following Natalie's gaze. I've never trusted that man. Daniel's father hired him, or I'd have shown him the door years ago. Natalie was surprised by the candid assessment. You don't approve of the CFO? Jeffrey cares about numbers, not people, Eleanor said firmly. He's been trying to steer the company away from my husband's vision since the day George died. Daniel has been fighting to preserve his father's legacy, the commitment to sustainable farming, to treating workers fairly, to being a positive force in the community. The pieces clicked into place for Natalie. Daniel's desire to work alongside the farm laborers, his insistence on quality over profit margins, his genuine connection to the land, these weren't just personal quirks, but expressions of values he was fighting to maintain within the company. That's what the board conflict is really about, isn't it? Natalie realized. Not just Daniel's unconventional management style, but the entire direction of the company. Eleanor nodded, impressed. Exactly. Jeffrey and his allies want to maximize short-term profits. Daniel is committed to long-term sustainability and social responsibility. It's a fundamental clash of visions. This new understanding shifted Natalie's perspective. Daniel's deception about his identity still hurt, but she could now see it within a larger context of a man fighting to stay true to his values in a world that constantly pushed against them. "Thank you for telling me this," Natalie said sincerely. Eleanor smiled warmly. "Sometimes we need to step back to see the whole picture." She patted Natalie's arm. "Now, I should go say hello to those board members. They're less likely to cause trouble if they know I'm watching." As Eleanor walked away, Natalie noticed Vanessa hovering near Jeffrey and the board members, clearly waiting to be introduced. Martin caught Natalie's eye from across the grounds and nodded meaningfully. Their suspicions about Vanessa and Jeffrey's alliance were looking more likely by the minute. Natalie was debating whether to warn Daniel immediately when she spotted him heading toward his office in the main building, away from the festival grounds. Acting on impulse, she followed. Daniel closed his office door, needing a moment of quiet amid the festival's cheerful chaos. The event was a tremendous success, exceeding all expectations, and he felt a surge of pride in what Natalie had accomplished. She had transformed a simple tradition into something truly special, just as she had transformed his life in the short time he'd known her. Seeing her today, confidently managing the festival, charming visitors and vendors alike, had only deepened his feelings for her. But the distance between them remained, a constant ache in his chest. She was professional and polite in their interactions, but the warmth and connection they'd once shared seemed lost forever. A knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, expecting Martin with another festival update. Instead, Natalie entered, closing the door behind her. "Do you have a minute?" "For you?" "Always," Daniel replied honestly. "Is everything okay?" "Oh, with the festival." "The festival's fine," Natalie assured him, looking uncharacteristically nervous. I had an interesting conversation with your mother," Daniel groaned. "I apologize for whatever she said. My mother means well, but subtlety isn't her strong suit." Small smile touched Natalie's lips. "Actually, I found her refreshingly direct. She helped me understand some things about you and about the company, such as why you work in the fields when you don't have to, why you fight with the board over business practices, why maintaining your father's vision matters so much to you." Daniel was surprised by her insight. "My father believed that a business should do more than make money. It should improve lives, the lives of its workers, its community, its customers. Jeffrey and his allies see that as sentimental nonsense." "It's not nonsense," Natalie said firmly. "It's what makes this place special." "Try telling that to the board," Daniel sighed. "Jeffrey's been gathering support for a vote of no confidence. With the board members he brought today, he's making his power play. That's actually why I wanted to talk to you," Natalie said, her expression turning serious. "Martin and I think Vanessa may be working with Jeffrey against you." Daniel's brow furrowed. "Vanessa, I know it sounds paranoid," Natalie interrupted, "but Martin's seen them together several times, having private conversations. And her sudden appearance, right when Jeffrey's challenging your leadership, seems suspicious." Daniel wanted to dismiss the idea, but he couldn't deny the timing was odd. Even if that's true, what could Vanessa possibly do to influence the board? "She was your fiancée," Natalie pointed out. "If she tells the board members you're emotionally unstable or unfit to lead, it could sway those who are on the fence." The possibility hadn't occurred to Daniel, but it made a troubling amount of sense. Vanessa knew intimate details about him, things that could be twisted or exaggerated to paint him in an unflattering light. "I appreciate the warning," he said, soberly. "But without proof, there's not much I can do except be careful around both of them." Natalie stepped closer, her professional demeanor softening. "There's something else, Daniel. Your mother told me about your father's vision for the company, what you're fighting to preserve. I think I understand better now why you did what you did, why being Danny matters to you." Her understanding, coming after weeks of distance, felt like a gift. "It wasn't just about finding someone who didn't care about my money," Daniel admitted quietly. "It was about finding out if I could be valued for who I am without the Anderson name opening doors." "And did you?" Natalie asked softly. "Find what you were looking for?" Their eyes met, the question hanging between them, weighted with meaning. Before Daniel could answer, the door burst open, and Vanessa swept in, her timing as impeccable as ever. "There you are, darling," she exclaimed, ignoring Natalie completely. "Jeffrey and the board members are asking for you. Something about making a special announcement at the festival." Daniel frowned. "What announcement?" Vanessa shrugged dramatically. "How should I know? I'm just the messenger." But they seem quite excited about it. "I'll be right there," Daniel promised, his instincts on high alert. As Vanessa sashayed out, her mission accomplished, Daniel turned back to Natalie. "I'm sorry about the interruption. We should probably go," Natalie agreed. Professional mask back in place. "If Jeffrey's planning something, you should be there." Daniel hesitated, reluctant to leave their conversation unfinished. "Natalie, about what you asked." "It can wait," she assured him, though her eyes told a different story. "The festival can't?" With a reluctant nod, Daniel led the way back to the grounds, his mind racing. What was Jeffrey planning? And more importantly, what had Natalie been about to say before they were interrupted? Uasim, the main stage area, was packed with festival attendees when Daniel and Natalie arrived. Jeffrey stood at the microphone, the board members arrayed behind him like a tribunal. Martin intercepted them at the edge of the crowd, his expression grave. "He called an impromptu board meeting 20 minutes ago," Martin whispered urgently. "Right here at the festival. Whatever he's planning, he wants a public audience." Daniel's stomach tightened. "A vote of no confidence?" "I think so," Martin confirmed. "And he's got Vanessa ready to provide character testimony if needed." Natalie scanned the crowd, noticing Eleanor standing near the front, her posture rigid with displeasure. "What can we do?" Before either man could answer, Jeffrey's voice boomed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention. As Chief Financial Officer of Anderson Agricultural Industries, it gives me great pleasure to make a special announcement at this wonderful harvest festival." His smile didn't reach his eyes as he continued. "For those who don't know me, I'm Jeffrey Peterson. I've had the privilege of working with the Anderson family for over 20 years, helping to grow this company into the agricultural powerhouse it is today." Daniel clenched his jaw at the implication that Jeffrey, not the Anderson family, was responsible for the company's success. "Today I'm here with several distinguished members of our board of directors," Jeffrey gestured to the suited men behind him. "We've been so impressed by this festival, a perfect example of community engagement and brand promotion, that we've made an important decision." He paused dramatically, scanning the crowd until his eyes locked on Daniel. "We believe it's time for Anderson Agricultural Industries to fully embrace modern corporate leadership. Time to move beyond outdated sentimental management styles and focus on maximizing shareholder value." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as the implication became clear to those who understood corporate politics. "Therefore," Jeffrey continued, his voice hardening, "the board has convened a special session to vote on new leadership for the company, someone who will guide Anderson Agricultural Industries into a more profitable future without the eccentricities of the current management." The audacity of the move left Daniel momentarily speechless. To stage this coup at the Harvest Festival, in front of employees, community members, and press, was both calculating and cruel. "That snake," Martin hissed. "He's using the festival's success against you. If you object publicly, you'll ruin the event." Daniel knew Martin was right. A public confrontation would overshadow the festival and potentially damage the company's image. Exactly. what Jeffrey was counting on. Either Daniel would lose his position quietly, or he would fight and tarnish the festival Natalie had worked so hard to create. As Daniel struggled with this impossible choice, Natalie stepped forward, her expression determined. "Give me your phone," she whispered urgently. "What? Your phone," she repeated. "I have an idea, but I need your contacts, trust me." The last two words resonated deeply. Despite everything, Daniel did trust her. He handed over his phone without further question. As Jeffrey continued his carefully worded attack on Daniel's leadership style, Natalie scrolled through contacts, sending rapid-fire text messages. Her marketing mind was working overtime, formulating a counter-strategy on the fly. "I need 5 minutes," she told Martin. "Whatever you do, keep Jeffrey talking, but don't let the board vote yet." Martin nodded grimly and slipped through the crowd toward the stage. Meanwhile, Natalie disappeared toward the festival entrance, phone pressed to her ear. Left alone, Daniel watched as Jeffrey methodically built his case for new leadership, highlighting the company's recent financial performance, while conveniently ignoring the improvements in worker satisfaction, community relations, and sustainable practices that Daniel had prioritized. Martin had reached the stage and was now whispering something to Eleanor, who nodded and stepped forward to the microphone. "Before we proceed with any votes," Eleanor announced in a voice that commanded attention despite its gentility, "I believe it's appropriate to hear from all stakeholders, not just board members. After all, Anderson Agricultural Industries has always valued the input of our community and our workers." Jeffrey's smile tightened. "With all due respect, Mrs. Anderson, this is a board matter." "With all due respect, Mr. Peterson," Eleanor interrupted smoothly, "as the widow of the founder and a significant shareholder myself, I believe I have some say in how this proceeds. And I say we hear from others first." The crowd murmured approvingly. Eleanor was well respected in the community, and her intervention had shifted the dynamic. Jeffrey clearly hadn't anticipated her resistance. For the next several minutes, Eleanor skillfully managed the microphone, inviting longtime employees and community partners to speak about their experiences with the company under Daniel's leadership. One by one, they told stories of his fairness, his hands-on approach, his commitment to sustainable practices. Daniel was moved by their support, but he knew it wouldn't be enough to sway the board members who had already aligned with Jeffrey. He needed a financial argument, not just emotional appeals. Just as Jeffrey was beginning to look impatient with the testimonials, a commotion at the back of the crowd caught everyone's attention. Natalie was returning, accompanied by several well-dressed individuals whom Daniel recognized immediately. Representatives from the largest organic food retailers in the region, companies that Anderson Agricultural Industries had been courting as potential partners. Natalie led them directly to the stage, her expression both professional and triumphant. "Mr. Peterson," she said clearly, "before the board votes on anything, I believe these gentlemen would like to make an announcement of their own." The lead retailer, a distinguished man named Richard Torres, took the microphone. "Thank you, Ms. Price. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Richard Torres, CEO of Freshworth Organics. Today I'm pleased to announce that after months of negotiation, Freshworth and 2 other premium organic retailers have decided to enter into an exclusive 5-year contract with Anderson Agricultural Industries." The crowd buzzed with excitement as Torres continued. "This partnership, which will increase Anderson's revenue by an estimated 30% annually, was finalized today after we witnessed firsthand the company's commitment to community engagement and sustainable farming practices, commitments that Daniel Anderson has championed despite resistance from within his own organization." Torres looked directly at the board members. "Let me be clear. Our companies are partnering with Anderson Agricultural Industries because of Daniel's vision and leadership, not despite it. Should that leadership change, we would be forced to reconsider our position." The board members shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances. The financial implications of Torres's statement were impossible to ignore. The potential revenue from these partnerships far outweighed any short-term gains Jeffrey's cost-cutting measures might achieve. Jeffrey's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "This is highly irregular," he sputtered. "The board wasn't informed of these negotiations." "Actually," Natalie interjected smoothly, All documentation was submitted through proper channels last month. I have copies for each board member. She handed out folders she'd retrieved from her office. You'll note that the projected revenue from these partnerships exceeds Mr. Peterson's growth estimates by 15%, while maintaining our commitment to sustainable practices. The board members flipped through the documents with increasing interest, their expressions shifting from skepticism to consideration. One by one, they stepped away from Jeffrey to review the figures more carefully. Daniel stared at Natalie in amazement. She had not only anticipated Jeffrey's move, but had countered it with a masterstroke of her own, leveraging her marketing expertise and Daniel's business connections to create an undeniable financial argument for his continued leadership. As the board members huddled in discussion, Vanessa sidled up to Jeffrey, whispering urgently in his ear. His expression darkened further, and he shook his head sharply. Whatever plan they had concocted was clearly unraveling. Finally, the senior board member, a woman named Patricia Winters, approached the microphone. In light of this significant development, the board has decided to postpone any leadership vote until these partnership agreements can be fully reviewed. In the meantime, Daniel Anderson will continue as CEO with our full support. The crowd erupted in applause. Festival attendees might not understand all the corporate politics, but they grasped that something important had just happened, a victory for their beloved Sunshine Valley Farm and its hands-on owner. Jeffrey stalked off the stage, Vanessa trailing behind him, both visibly seething. Daniel barely noticed their departure. His eyes were fixed on Natalie, who stood quietly at the edge of the stage, her expression a mix of satisfaction and relief. As the festival resumed its celebratory atmosphere, Daniel made his way to her side. "You saved me," he said simply. Natalie shook her head. "I saved the company and my contract." But the light in her eyes told a different story. She had fought for him, using her skills and intelligence to protect not just his position, but his vision for the company. It was more than strategy, it was an act of faith. "How did you know about those partnerships?" Daniel asked. "They were still in preliminary stages." "Your mother mentioned them when we were talking," Natalie explained. "She said you'd been working on them for months, but keeping quiet until everything was finalized. When Jeffrey made his move, I realized we needed to accelerate the timeline." "And the retailers agreed, just like that?" A small smile played on Natalie's lips. "Let's just say I'm very persuasive, and they were already impressed by the festival. Seeing the community support for sustainable farming practices convinced them that Anderson Agricultural Industries shares their values." Daniel shook his head in wonder. "Natalie Price, you are remarkable." A faint blush colored her cheeks. "Just doing my job." "No," Daniel said softly. "This was far beyond your job description. This was—" He trailed off, unable to find words adequate to express his gratitude and admiration. Natalie held his gaze. For a long moment, something shifting in her eyes. "Before in your office, you never answered my question." Daniel's heart quickened. "Ask me again." "Did you find what you were looking for?" Natalie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "When you became Danny?" "Yes," Daniel answered without hesitation. "I found someone who saw me, really saw me, beyond the wealth and the name. Someone who challenged me, who made me laugh, who made me want to be better." He took a deep breath. "I found you, Natalie." The vulnerability in his admission hung between them, raw and honest. For a moment, neither spoke, the sounds of the festival fading into the background as they stood at a crossroads of trust and forgiveness. "I'm still angry about the lies," Natalie admitted finally. "But today, watching you fight for your father's vision, seeing how much this place and these people mean to you, I understand better why you did what you did." "Does that mean?" Daniel left the question unfinished, afraid to hope. "It means I'm willing to try," Natalie said carefully. "Not to pick up where we left off, but to start something new, something honest." It wasn't a declaration of love, but to Daniel, it felt like one, a promise of possibility, a door opening where before there had only been walls. "That's all I ask," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "A chance to show you who I really am, not Danny, not Daniel Anderson, the CEO, but just me." Natalie's smile was tentative but genuine. "I'd like that." As the harvest festival continued, around them something new was beginning, a careful, cautious reconciliation built on truth rather than deception. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Trust, once broken, couldn't be repaired overnight. But standing amid the fruits of their shared labor, surrounded by the community they'd both come to care for, Daniel and Natalie took the first step toward a future neither had imagined when their paths first crossed. Whether that future would lead to love remained to be seen. But for now, the possibility was enough, a seed planted in fertile soil, waiting for the right season to grow. Autumn gave way to winter at Sunshine Valley Farm. The Harvest Festival's success had solidified Daniel's position as CEO. With Jeffrey, Peterson's influence significantly diminished. The partnerships Natalie had secured were officially signed, bringing new prosperity to the farm and vindication for Daniel's sustainable business approach. As for Jeffrey and Vanessa, they had departed. Soon after their failed coup attempt, Jeffrey had taken a leave of absence from the company, a face-saving measure before his eventual resignation. Vanessa had returned to the city, her schemes thwarted and her pride wounded. For Natalie and Daniel, the months following the festival had been a careful dance of rebuilding trust. True to her word, Natalie had given Daniel a chance to show her who he really was. Not the farmhand she had first fallen for, nor the billionaire CEO, but the man who existed somewhere in between. They started small. Professional lunches to discuss, marketing initiatives gradually evolved into dinners, where work talk gave way to more personal conversations. Weekend walks around the property where Daniel showed Natalie his favorite spots. Movie nights at her cottage, sitting a respectable distance apart on the couch, but somehow ending up closer by the final credits. It wasn't always smooth. There were moments when the ghost of his deception resurfaced, causing Natalie to withdraw. Times when Daniel's wealth and position created an invisible barrier between them. But they persevered, both understanding that anything worth having required patience and work. Now, as Christmas approached, Natalie stood at the window of her cottage, watching snowflakes drift lazily to the ground. The farm looked like something from a postcard, white and pristine in the early morning light. 6 months ago, she would have been counting the days until she could return to Chicago. Now, the thought of leaving Sunshine Valley filled her with an unexpected sadness. A knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. She opened it to find Daniel standing there, cheeks flushed from the cold, a paper bag in his hands. "Morning," he greeted her with a warm smile. "I brought breakfast." "It's 7 a.m. on a Saturday," Natalie pointed out, but stepped aside to let him in. "Best time to enjoy fresh pastries," Daniel replied, setting the bag on her small dining table. "I was at the bakery in town when they came out of the oven." "Of course you were," Natalie said with a fond shake of her head. Daniel's enthusiasm for simple pleasures, fresh bread, sunrise walks, the first coffee of the day, was one of the many things she had come to cherish about him. As they settled at the table with their breakfast, Daniel seemed unusually nervous, fiddling with his coffee mug and glancing at her when he thought she wasn't looking. "Okay, what's going on?" Natalie finally asked. "You're acting strange." Daniel took a deep breath. "I have something to ask you. 2 things, actually." Natalie's heart skipped a beat. "I'm listening." "First," Daniel began, "the company Christmas party is next weekend. I know it's not really your thing, but I was hoping you might go with me. As my date, not as the marketing director." After months of careful rebuilding, this was the first time either of them had explicitly acknowledged that what was growing between them was more than friendship. "I'd like that," Natalie said softly. Relief and happiness flooded Daniel's face. "Great. That's great." "You said there were 2 things?" Natalie prompted when he fell silent. "Right." Daniel looked even more nervous now. "The second thing is about your contract." Natalie tensed. Her 2-year agreement with Anderson Agricultural Industries had been a frequent source of tension between them. Though the terms were fair, better than fair thanks to her negotiating, the legal obligation still created an uneven power dynamic that neither of them was entirely comfortable with. "What about it?" she asked cautiously. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. "I want to cancel it." "What?" Natalie's stomach dropped. After everything they'd been through, Was he terminating her position? Seeing her expression, Daniel rushed to explain. Not like that. I mean, I want to release you from the obligation. Make it a regular employment contract that you can leave whenever you want, with no penalty or remaining debt. Natalie stared at him, processing his words. Why would you do that? Because I don't want you staying because you have to, Daniel said simply. I want you to stay because you choose to. He handed her the envelope. Inside, she found legal papers that effectively cancelled her debt obligation and converted her, positioned to a standard employment arrangement with the same salary and benefits, but without the binding 2-year commitment. You're setting me free, Natalie said quietly, emotion tightening her throat. Daniel nodded. You've more than earned it. The marketing department has never performed better. The Harvest Festival was a huge success, and the new partnerships you secured have transformed the company's outlook. But more than that, he hesitated, then continued with raw honesty. I can't keep asking you to trust me while holding legal power over you. It's not right, and it's not what I want for us. The simple gesture touched Natalie deeply. She understood what it cost him, not financially but emotionally. He was giving her the freedom to walk away, knowing she might choose to do exactly that. This doesn't change anything about your employment or position, Daniel continued. Only the obligation to stay. You're still the marketing director for as long as you want to be, and I hope that's for a very long time. Natalie studied the papers, a mix of emotions swirling through her. 6 months ago, when she had discovered Daniel's deception, she would have signed these papers and booked the first ticket back to Chicago. But now, thank you, she said finally, setting the papers aside. This means more than you know. So you'll sign them? Daniel asked. I will, Natalie agreed, but not because I'm planning to leave. Hope flickered in Daniel's eyes. No? Natalie shook her head, a smile forming. It turns out farm life has grown on me. I'm not ready to give it up just yet. The relief on Daniel's face was palpable, but he kept his tone light. The herb garden would miss you terribly. Just the herb garden? Natalie teased. Daniel's expression softened. No, not just the herb garden. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken feelings. Then Daniel cleared his throat. Well, I should let you enjoy your Saturday. I'll pick you up at 7 for the Christmas party next weekend. 7 it is, Natalie confirmed. After he left, Natalie returned to the window, watching as Daniel walked back toward the main house, his figure growing smaller against the snowy landscape. The papers he'd given her represented more than legal freedom. They were a declaration of trust, a leap of faith that she would choose to stay even when she was free to leave. And the surprising thing was, she wanted to stay. Somewhere between harvesting herbs and saving Daniel's company, between feeling betrayed and finding forgiveness, Sunshine Valley Farm had become home. And Daniel had become someone she couldn't imagine her life without. The night of the company Christmas party arrived with perfect winter weather, just enough snow to look festive without making travel difficult. Natalie spent more time than she cared to admit getting ready, finally settling on a deep green dress that she'd ordered online specifically for the occasion. When Daniel arrived to pick her up, his appreciative gaze made the effort worthwhile. You look beautiful, he said sincerely. You clean up pretty well yourself, Natalie replied, taking in his tailored suit. It was the first time she'd seen him truly dressed up, and the effect was striking. This was Daniel Anderson, CEO, but the warmth in his eyes was all Danny. The party was being held at a historic hotel in town, its ballroom transformed into a winter wonderland of twinkling lights and elegant decorations. As they entered together, Natalie was acutely aware of the curious glances and whispered comments from other employees. Though they had been careful to maintain professionalism at work, rumors about their relationship had inevitably circulated. Ignore them, Daniel murmured, his hand warm against the small of her back. People will always talk. I don't mind, Natalie assured him. Let them talk. They made their way through the crowd, stopping to chat with various employees and their spouses. Natalie was surprised by how many people she had come to know and care about during her months at Sunshine Valley. Irene was there, with her husband Martin with his longtime partner, Eleanor looking elegant in festive red. "You two make a handsome couple," Eleanor commented when they greeted her, her approval evident. "Mother," Daniel warned gently, though his smile softened the reproof. "What? I'm merely stating facts," Eleanor replied innocently. "Natalie, dear, you look lovely. That color suits you perfectly." "Thank you, Eleanor," Natalie said warmly. She had grown fond of Daniel's mother over the past months, finding in her a mentor and friend. As dinner was served, Daniel was called away briefly to handle a minor issue with the catering. Left alone at their table, Natalie found herself joined by an older man she didn't recognize. "So you're the famous Natalie Price," he said, taking Daniel's empty seat. "I've heard quite a bit about you." "I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage," Natalie replied politely. "George Anderson, Jr." The man introduced himself. "Daniel's uncle, I serve on the board." Natalie immediately tensed. George Jr. had been among Jeffrey's supporters during the attempted coup at the Harvest Festival. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Anderson." "I'll get straight to the point, Ms. Price," George said, his tone businesslike. "I'm curious about your intentions toward my nephew." Natalie blinked in surprise. "My intentions?" "The Anderson fortune has attracted many opportunistic women over the years," George continued bluntly. "Daniel's little experiment with pretending to be poor was foolish, but perhaps not entirely misguided given the family history." Natalie's initial shock gave way to indignation. "With all due respect, Mr. Anderson, my relationship with Daniel is none of your business." "The well-being of the company is very much my business," George countered, "and Daniel's personal life affects the company, whether he acknowledges it or not." "If you're implying that I'm with Daniel for his money," Natalie said, keeping her voice level despite her rising anger, "you couldn't be more wrong. In fact, I fell for him when I thought he was a farmhand with nothing to his name." George's eyes narrowed. "Yet here you are, at his side now that you know the truth. Quite a convenient evolution of feelings." Before Natalie could respond, another voice cut in. "That's enough, Uncle George." Daniel had returned, his expression thunderous as he took in the scene before him. "Whatever you're saying to Natalie, I suggest you stop immediately." George rose slowly, unperturbed by his nephew's anger. "Just having a friendly chat, Daniel, getting to know the woman who seems to have captured your heart." He nodded to Natalie. "A pleasure meeting you, Ms. Price. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other." As George walked away, Daniel took his seat, concern replacing anger. "Are you okay? What did he say to you?" "Nothing I couldn't handle," Natalie assured him, though the encounter had left her shaken. "He was just being protective, in his own misguided way." Daniel shook his head in frustration. "My uncle has always been suspicious of anyone he perceives as an outsider. He was the same way with my mother when she married my father." He took Natalie's hand. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that." "Does your family think I'm a gold digger?" Natalie asked directly. "Uncle George might," Daniel admitted, "but he's hardly representative. My mother adores you, and my cousins think you're the best thing that's happened to me in years." "And what do you think?" Natalie asked softly. Daniel's gaze held hers, his eyes full of emotion. "I think meeting you was the luckiest day of my life, even if I made a mess of things afterward." The sincerity in his voice melted away the lingering discomfort from George's insinuations. Whatever others might think, what mattered was what existed between them. The trust they had rebuilt, the connection that had survived betrayal and misunderstanding. The rest of the evening passed in a pleasant blur of dinner, dancing, and laughter. As the traditional employee gift exchange began, Daniel excused himself briefly, returning with a small wrapped package. "This isn't part of the official exchange," he explained, handing it to Natalie. "Just something I wanted you to have." Natalie opened it carefully to reveal a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a miniature herb garden with tiny plants crafted in beautiful detail. "Daniel," she breathed, touching the charm gently. "It's beautiful." "To remember where we started," he said, helping her fasten it around her wrist. "No matter where we go from here." The thoughtful gift brought tears to Natalie's eyes. It acknowledged their complicated beginning, without dwelling on the deception, celebrating instead the genuine connection that had formed between them in that herb garden. "I love it," she said simply. "Thank you." As the party wound down, Daniel suggested they step outside for some fresh air. The hotel's garden had been decorated with thousands of tiny lights, creating a magical setting against the snowy backdrop. They walked in comfortable silence, their breath forming small clouds in the cold night air. "I've been thinking about what Uncle George said." Daniel finally broke the silence. "About us." Natalie tensed slightly. "What about it?" "He's not the only one who will question your motives," Daniel said carefully. "My family, the company, even the tabloids, if they ever get wind of how we met. People will always wonder if you're with me for my money." "Let them wonder," Natalie said firmly. "I know the truth, and so do you," Daniel stopped walking and turned to face her. "And what is the truth, Natalie? Why are you still here when you could have left weeks ago? I gave you an out, no debt, no obligation. Yet you stayed." The directness of his question caught her off guard. Though she had asked herself the same thing many times, why had she stayed? Why had she given him a second chance when her pride and hurt had demanded she walk away? "I stayed because despite everything," Natalie said slowly, finding the words as she spoke, "despite the lies and the hurt and the complications, I found something real here. With you." She took a deep breath and continued. "The man I fell for. In that herb garden, the one who worked hard and cared deeply and saw me for who I really was, he wasn't a lie. He was just a part of you that most people never get to see, and that's the man I'm still falling for every day." Daniel's eyes shone with emotion in the moonlight. "I don't deserve you," he said softly. "Probably not," Natalie agreed with a teasing smile. "But you're stuck with me anyway." Daniel laughed, then grew serious again. "I love you, Natalie Price. I think I have since the day you called me out for not looking like a proper farmhand." The declaration, though not entirely unexpected, still sent Natalie's heart racing. For months they had danced around their feelings, rebuilding trust before risking their hearts again. Now, standing in the winter garden with snow beginning to fall gently around them, it seemed the perfect moment for truth. "I love you too," Natalie admitted, the words both frightening and freeing. "God help me, but I do." Daniel's smile was radiant as he closed the distance between them, his hands cradling her face with infinite tenderness. "May I?" he whispered, his breath warm against her lips. In answer, Natalie rose on tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, a question and an answer all at once. Then, as Daniel's arms slipped around her waist, drawing her closer, it deepened into something more, a promise, a beginning, a coming home. When they finally broke apart, snowflakes clinging to their hair and eyelashes, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "So what happens now?" "Now?" Natalie smiled up at him. "Now we figure it out together. No more pretending, no more hiding, just us, finding our way." "I like the sound of that," Daniel murmured, brushing a snowflake from her cheek. Hand in hand, they walked back toward the warm lights of the hotel, leaving footprints in the fresh snow side by side, equal steps, a shared path forward. Spring returned to Sunshine Valley Farm, bringing with it new growth and possibilities. The herb garden Natalie had once tended as punishment was now her weekend sanctuary, a place she visited not out of obligation, but joy. Though her marketing responsibilities kept her busy, she never lost touch with the rhythms of farm life that had unexpectedly captured her heart. She sat among the fragrant herbs now, enjoying the warm sunshine after a long winter. So much had changed in a year. The debt that had brought her to Sunshine Valley was long forgiven. The contract that had bound her was replaced by choice. The anger and hurt she had felt upon discovering Daniel's deception had transformed into understanding, and eventually love. "There you are," Daniel's voice called from the greenhouse entrance. "I thought I might find you here." Natalie looked up with a smile as he approached. Unlike the early days when he'd pretended to be a simple farmhand, Daniel now moved easily. Between his roles, working the land he loved while also leading the company with confidence, he had found his balance, no longer needing to be either Danny or Daniel Anderson, but simply himself. "Just enjoying the sunshine," Natalie explained as he sat beside her. "It's been a beautiful spring." "It has," Daniel agreed, though his eyes were on her rather than the garden. Are you ready for tomorrow? Natalie nodded, butterflies fluttering in her stomach at the thought. As ready as I'll ever be. Tomorrow was the official opening of the Sunshine Valley Farmers Market, Natalie's latest project. A year-round marketplace where local farmers and artisans could sell directly to consumers. The venture had been her idea, combining her marketing expertise with Daniel's commitment to supporting local agriculture. It represented their shared vision for the future, both personally and professionally. The press will be there, Daniel reminded her, including some national outlets. Your story has captured quite a bit of attention. Natalie groaned good-naturedly. Don't remind me. City girl transformed by farm life makes me sound like the heroine of a bad romance novel. I think it's more like brilliant marketing executive revolutionizes agricultural business model, Daniel corrected with a grin. Though I prefer woman falls for farmer despite his terrible deception. Myself. That's not a headline, that's an entire book, Natalie laughed, leaning against his shoulder comfortably. Daniel's arm slipped around her waist, drawing her closer. Maybe it is. Our story. With a happy ending? Natalie asked, tilting her face. Up to his. I'm counting on it, Daniel replied before kissing her softly. As they sat together in the herb garden where their story had begun, Natalie reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here. A financial mistake, a debt, a lie, a betrayal, all painful at the time, yet all leading to this moment of contentment and purpose. Daniel must have been thinking along similar lines, for he said quietly, "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd just been honest from the start. If I'd introduced myself as Daniel Anderson that first day." "I would have hated you," Natalie admitted frankly. "I was so angry about being forced to work here, so resentful of whoever owned this place. If I'd known you were the evil billionaire I owed money to, I would never have given you a chance." "So my terrible plan actually worked?" Daniel asked with mock surprise. "Don't push your luck," Natalie warned, though her smile softened the words. "Let's just say that sometimes the wrong paths lead to the right destinations." "And this is the right destination?" Daniel asked, suddenly serious. "This life, this place, and me?" Natalie looked around at the farm that had become her home, then back at the man who had become her heart. "Yes," she said simply. "This is exactly where I'm meant to be." Daniel's answering smile was radiant. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I was going to wait until after the market opening tomorrow, make some grand gesture in front of everyone," he admitted. "But this feels right. Here, where it all began." Natalie's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a ring. Not an ostentatious diamond as might be expected from a billionaire, but a delicate band of intertwined gold and silver with a small emerald nestled among tiny leaves. "Natalie Price," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "You've seen all of me, the good, the bad, the complicated, and somehow you love me anyway. You challenge me, inspire me, make me laugh, and remind me daily of what truly matters. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred Natalie's vision as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." As Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, Natalie marveled at life's unexpected turns. She had come to Sunshine Valley a reluctant debtor, counting the days until she could escape. She would leave it someday as Natalie Anderson, not escaping but expanding, bringing the lessons and love she had found here to new ventures, new communities, new possibilities. But that was for the future. For now, as Daniel gathered her into his arms, sealing their engagement with a kiss that promised forever, Natalie was exactly where she belonged. In the garden, where a city girl and a farmhand had begun a journey neither could have imagined, finding in each other not what they sought, but what they needed. And that, Natalie thought as she kissed the man she loved beneath the spring sunshine, was the greatest harvest of all. The end.